Marcus Thompson had served in the Navy SEALs for 15 years. He had completed dangerous missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other hostile territories. Today should have been different. He was on leave, enjoying a quiet Tuesday morning in Atlanta. He wore simple civilian clothes, a gray t-shirt, blue jeans, and white sneakers. Nobody could tell he was a highly decorated military commander. The morning sun was bright as Marcus drove down Peachtree Street. He had just finished breakfast at his favorite diner and was heading to the gym when he stopped at a red light. In the parking lot of a small grocery store, he noticed an elderly woman struggling with heavy shopping bags. Her hands were shaking, and one bag had already fallen, spilling oranges across the pavement. Without thinking twice, Marcus pulled into the parking lot. The woman looked to be in her 80s, trying unsuccessfully to pick up the scattered fruit. Her face showed frustration and embarrassment. Marcus approached with a friendly smile and knelt down to help. "Let me get those for you, ma'am," he said in his calm voice. The elderly woman looked up gratefully. "Oh, thank you so much, young man. These old hands just aren't what they used to be." She introduced herself as Mrs. Dorothy Chen, explaining she lived alone and usually managed fine. But today the bags were especially heavy. Marcus quickly gathered the oranges and noticed 4 more bags by her car. Without being asked, he began loading them into her trunk. They chatted as he worked. Mrs. Chen talked about her grandchildren in California, and Marcus mentioned having family there too. She seemed delighted to have someone to talk to. When Marcus finished arranging the bags carefully in her trunk, Mrs. Chen tried to give him $20 for his help. He politely refused. "No need for that, ma'am. I'm just happy I could help." He was closing the trunk when police sirens suddenly filled the air. A patrol car came speeding into the parking lot, tires screeching as it stopped just feet away. Officer Bradley Stevens jumped out, his hand already on his weapon. "Step away from the vehicle. Now," Stevens shouted harshly. Marcus was confused but remained calm. His SEAL training had prepared him for high-stress situations. He raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no threat. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just helping this lady with her groceries." But Stevens wasn't listening. His face was tense with suspicion. "I said step back. Keep your hands where I can see them." Mrs. Chen became upset and tried to explain. "Officer, please. This young man was helping me. He didn't do anything wrong." Stevens dismissed her with a wave. "Ma'am, step back for your safety. This is a police matter now." Marcus tried again, keeping his voice respectful. "Officer Stevens," he said, reading the name tag. "I'm Commander Marcus Thompson, United States Navy. I saw Mrs. Chen needed help with her groceries, so I stopped to assist." But mentioning his military rank seemed to make Stevens more aggressive. "I don't care who you claim to be. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The situation was escalating for no reason. Other shoppers had stopped to watch. Some took out their phones. Marcus knew this could go badly if not handled properly. He turned around slowly, following instructions exactly. The cold metal handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Stevens was unnecessarily rough, pulling Marcus's arms back hard. Mrs. Chen continued protesting, her voice shaking with distress. "This is wrong. He's a good man. He was helping me." Stevens ignored her completely, reciting Miranda rights while pushing Marcus toward the patrol car. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." "What are the charges?" Marcus asked calmly. "Attempted robbery and resisting arrest," Stevens replied without hesitation. Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. He had done everything the officer asked and had even refused the money Mrs. Chen offered. But he knew better than to argue on the street. His training taught him that court was the place to fight this, not here. As Stevens pushed his head down to get him into the patrol car, Marcus noticed the bank's security camera across the street. Good, he thought. There would be evidence. He also noticed Stevens' dashboard camera seemed to be turned off, which struck him as odd. The patrol car door slammed shut. Through the window, Marcus could see Mrs. Chen still arguing with Officer Stevens, gesturing wildly. Other officers were arriving, drawn by the commotion. As the car pulled away, Marcus stared out the window at familiar streets. He thought about calling his lawyer, about calling his commanding officer. But mostly, he thought about Mrs. Chen and hoped someone would make sure she got home safely. 3 months had passed since the parking lot incident. Marcus Thompson sat in courtroom 4B of the Fulton County Superior Court. The room smelled of old wood and polish, with morning light streaming through high windows. Marcus wore his Navy dress uniform, every medal and ribbon precisely placed on his chest. Each decoration told a story of service and sacrifice. His lawyer, Janet Rodriguez, had advised against wearing the uniform, worried it might seem like he was seeking sympathy from the jury. But Marcus insisted. He had earned the right to wear it through years of dedicated service. He wouldn't hide who he was now, when his integrity was being questioned. Janet sat beside him with neat stacks of folders on the defense table. She was sharp-eyed and sharp-minded, having taken Marcus's case because something smelled wrong from the beginning. Too many details in Officer Stevens' report didn't add up, especially the conveniently malfunctioned dashboard camera. Across the courtroom, Officer Bradley Stevens sat at the prosecution table in his police uniform, looking confident and relaxed. He whispered occasionally to Prosecutor Robert Marshall, a thin gray-haired man with 20 years of trial experience. Judge Patricia Williams presided over the courtroom. Known for being fair but tough, her years on the bench had given her a sixth sense for detecting lies. As she called court to order, her eyes swept across the room, taking in every detail. The gallery was half full. Several of Marcus's fellow Navy SEALs attended in dress uniforms to support him. Reporters occupied the back rows with notebooks ready. The jury of 12 citizens sat in their box, ready to decide Marcus's fate based on what they heard. Prosecutor Marshall stood to begin. He painted a picture of that morning that bore no resemblance to Marcus's memory. According to Marshall, Marcus had been caught robbing an elderly woman, and Officer Stevens had arrived just in time to prevent a violent crime. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he listened to the lies, but military discipline kept him perfectly still. Janet had warned that showing anger would hurt their case. He sat with straight back and folded hands, the picture of composure. Officer Stevens took the witness stand first, swearing on the Bible to tell the truth. Then he began his practice testimony, describing how he'd responded to a suspicious activity call and found Marcus aggressively approaching an elderly woman's vehicle. The defendant was leaning into the driver's side window. Stevens testified. The elderly woman appeared distressed. When I approached, the defendant became hostile and refused to comply with my commands. Marcus watched Stevens lie with impressive ease. The officer described events that bore no resemblance to reality. Marcus fighting arrest, requiring force to subdue him. Stevens painted Marcus as a dangerous criminal caught red-handed. The prosecutor nodded along, occasionally asking questions to emphasize points. Officer Stevens, what do you believe the defendant's intentions were? Stevens didn't hesitate. Based on my training and experience, I believe he was attempting to rob the elderly woman. His aggressive behavior and resistance to arrest support this conclusion. Janet took furious notes beside Marcus. Every lie Stevens told was more rope to hang himself with. She had done extensive homework investigating every aspect of that morning. One thing especially bothered her. Despite multiple attempts, they couldn't locate Mrs. Dorothy Chen. The elderly woman who could confirm Marcus's story had seemingly vanished. Her address led to an empty apartment. Phone numbers were disconnected. It was as if she never existed. Judge Williams watched Stevens carefully, her experience helping her spot deception. Stevens was too polished, too rehearsed. His answers came too quickly, like memorized script. Marcus forced himself to remain calm as Stevens continued fabricating. He thought about his years of service, the men he'd led into combat, the sacrifices made for his country. Now he sat accused of robbing an elderly woman he'd actually been helping. Janet leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry. I've got this." Her confidence steadied him. She had promised the truth would emerge, and Marcus had to trust the system would deliver justice. The prosecutor finished his direct examination. Stevens looked pleased, sitting back with a slight smile, clearly believing his testimony had been convincing. Marshall returned to his seat looking satisfied. Judge Williams turned to the defense table. "Ms. Rodriguez, your witness." Judge Patricia Williams had presided over thousands of cases in her 20-year career, developing a keen sense for detecting lies. As Officer Stevens continued testifying, something felt very wrong. His answers were too perfect, too rehearsed. She noticed his eyes darting to the prosecutor before certain answers, as if seeking approval. Janet Rodriguez stood at the podium with her folder open. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, examining every detail of Stevens' report and noting every inconsistency. Now it was time to expose the truth. "Officer Stevens," Janet began calmly but firmly, "you stated that Mr. Thompson was aggressively approaching the vehicle. Can you describe exactly what you saw?" Stevens shifted slightly, his confidence fading. He was moving quickly toward the driver's side door, where the elderly woman was seated. "And you could clearly see this from your position?" Janet pressed. "Absolutely," Stevens replied, regaining some confidence. "I had a clear view of the entire situation." Janet nodded slowly, then pulled out a large photograph. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit A, an aerial photograph of the crime scene." The judge nodded. Janet placed the photograph on an easel where everyone could see it. The image showed the parking lot from above, with streets and buildings clearly marked. "Officer Stevens, according to your report, you approached from Maple Street, correct?" Janet pointed to the street on the photograph. "Yes, that's correct," Stevens answered. "And the elderly woman's vehicle was parked here, facing this direction." Stevens leaned forward to look. "Yes, that appears to be correct." "So tell me, Officer Stevens," Janet's voice sharpened, "if you approached from Maple Street and the vehicle was positioned as shown, how could you have seen what was happening on the driver's side? The vehicle itself would have been blocking your view." The courtroom fell silent. Everyone could see the problem now. The photograph clearly showed Stevens couldn't have had the view he claimed. Stevens' face reddened. His eyes darted to the prosecutor, then back to Janet. I meant as I got closer, I could see." "So you didn't actually see the initial interaction?" Janet interrupted. "You're changing your testimony." "No, I mean, yes, I saw." Stevens stumbled over his words. Judge Williams leaned forward. "Officer Stevens, please answer directly. Could you or could you not see the driver's side of the vehicle from your initial position?" Stevens swallowed hard, sweat forming on his forehead. "From my initial position, I could see the vehicle and the defendant near it, but not what was happening on the driver's side." Janet pressed. Not completely," Stevens admitted reluctantly. Marcus watched with growing hope. For the first time since his arrest, cracks showed in the prosecution's case. He glanced at the jury and saw several members frowning, clearly troubled by Stevens' changing story. Janet pulled out another document. "Officer Stevens, let's discuss the timeline. According to your report, you received the suspicious activity call at 9:52 a.m. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's what my report states," Stevens answered, trying to regain composure. "And you arrived at the scene at approximately what time?" "About 9:54 a.m. It only took a couple minutes to get there." Janet nodded. "So you received the call at 9:52 and arrived at 9:54. Just 2 minutes. Very efficient. Now, Officer Stevens, are you familiar with the Atlanta City Bank across the street?" Stevens looked confused by the question. "Yes, I know where it is." "Are you aware the bank has security cameras facing the parking lot?" The color drained from Stevens' face. He hadn't known about the cameras. In his haste to file false reports, he'd missed this crucial detail. I wasn't aware of that. Well, we'll come back to those cameras shortly, Janet said with a slight smile. The jury was paying close attention now, sensing something important was happening. Judge Williams watched with sharp eyes. She had seen many officers testify and knew when one was in trouble. Stevens was sweating, his earlier confidence completely gone. His hands gripped the witness chair arms tightly. The prosecutor, ADA Marshall, looked uncomfortable too. He had based his case on Stevens' testimony, and now that testimony was crumbling. He scribbled notes frantically, trying to think of ways to salvage the situation. Officer Stevens, Janet continued, you testify that my client resisted arrest. Can you describe exactly how he resisted? Stevens seemed relieved to change topics. He was argumentative and didn't immediately comply with my commands. The courtroom had grown so quiet everyone could hear the air conditioning humming. Janet Rodriguez held a DVD in her hand. This was the moment she'd been building toward. The security footage from Atlanta City Bank would show what really happened that morning. Your Honor, Janet said clearly, the defense would like to submit new evidence, surveillance footage from the Atlanta City Bank, located directly across the street from the incident. Judge Williams nodded. Proceed, Counselor. The bailiff wheeled in a television monitor, positioning it where the jury could see clearly. Janet inserted the DVD and picked up the remote. Prosecutor Marshall looked worried. He hadn't known about this footage. Officer Stevens, Janet said, turning back to the witness, before we watch this video, would you like to revise any part of your testimony? Stevens shook his head stubbornly. My testimony is accurate. Very well, Janet said. She pressed play. Black and white footage appeared on screen. The timestamp read, Tuesday, 9:47 a.m. The camera showed a clear view of the parking lot. There was Mrs. Chen's car, and there was Marcus Thompson, walking casually toward it. The courtroom watched silently as the scene unfolded. Marcus approached the elderly woman, who was clearly struggling with grocery bags. He smiled and began helping her load them into the trunk. Their body language was relaxed and friendly. Mrs. Chen was smiling, gesturing as she talked. Marcus nodded and laughed at something she said. Does this look like aggressive behavior to you, Officer Stevens? Janet asked. Stevens didn't answer. His face had gone pale. The footage continued. Marcus carefully arranged the bags in the trunk. Mrs. Chen reached into her purse and appeared to offer him money. Marcus shook his head and waved his hands, politely refusing. They continued chatting as Marcus closed the trunk. Then, at 9:51 a.m. according to the timestamp, Officer Stevens' patrol car suddenly appeared in frame. It came speeding into the parking lot, tires screeching as it stopped just feet from where Marcus stood. The jury leaned forward, watching intently. Several members glanced at Stevens, then back at the screen. The footage showed Stevens jumping out immediately, hand on his weapon. Marcus's reaction was clearly visible, surprise, then confusion. He raised his hand slowly, making no sudden movements. Mrs. Chen immediately began gesturing and appeared to be explaining something to the officer. Officer Stevens, Janet said, pausing the video, you testify that you received the suspicious activity call at 9:52 a.m., but this footage shows you arriving at 9:51 a.m. How do you explain that? Stevens was sweating profusely. The timestamp must be wrong. The bank's security chief has provided an affidavit confirming their system's timestamps are accurate, Janet responded. Would you like to revise your testimony? The prosecutor stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. The defense is badgering the witness. Overruled, Judge Williams said firmly. The witness will answer the question. Stevens looked trapped, glancing around the courtroom as if searching for escape. I may have been mistaken about the exact time. So you arrived at the scene before the call was made? Janet pressed. I must have. I mean, the times might be. Officer Stevens, is it possible there never was a suspicious activity call? The question hung in the air like a bomb. The prosecutor objected again, but Judge Williams overruled once more. She leaned forward, full attention on Stevens. "I received a call," Stevens insisted weakly. Janet walked to the defense table and picked up another folder. "Your Honor, we've subpoenaed the dispatch records for that morning. There's no record of any suspicious activity called regarding that location at that time." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Williams banged her gavel. "Order. I'll have order in my courtroom." Janet continued playing the footage. The video showed Stevens approaching Marcus aggressively, pushing him against the car despite Marcus's obvious cooperation. Mrs. Chen could be seen pleading with the officer, but Stevens ignored her completely. "Does this match your testimony, Officer Stevens?" Janet asked. Stevens was cornered. The video contradicted everything he'd said. His story about Marcus being aggressive, about resisting arrest, all exposed as lies. The footage showed Marcus being handcuffed while Mrs. Chen continued protesting. At no point did Marcus resist or act aggressively. He followed every command, remained calm, and tried to explain the situation. "Officer Stevens," Janet said, her voice hard as steel, "did you lie in your police report?" Stevens's attorney, sitting in the gallery, suddenly stood. "Your Honor, I request a recess to confer with my client." Judge Williams looked furious. "Officer Stevens, I'm going to ask you directly, and I remind you that you're under oath. Did you fabricate your report about this incident?" Stevens looked at his attorney, then the prosecutor, then finally the judge. His shoulders sagged in defeat. I may have misremembered some details." "Misremembered?" Judge Williams's voice sharpened. "Officer Stevens, perjury is a serious crime." The jury whispered among themselves. Several looked angry. They had been lied to and knew it. The elderly man in the front row shook his head in disgust. Marcus watched with mixed emotions, vindicated but angry. This officer had tried to destroy his reputation, his career, possibly his life, all based on lies. And for what? Marcus still didn't understand why Stevens had targeted him. Janet wasn't finished. She had more evidence to present, more lies to expose. But already, the prosecution's case was in ruins. Stevens had been caught in his lies, tracked by video evidence he didn't know existed. "Your Honor," Janet said, "in light of this evidence, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client." Marshall stood, looking defeated. He knew his case was destroyed. "Your Honor, the state requests a recess to evaluate our position." Judge Williams looked at the clock. "Nearly noon. We'll take a lunch recess. But Mr. Marshall, when we return, I expect a decision from your office about these charges. And Officer Stevens, you are not to leave this courthouse. We have serious matters to discuss regarding your testimony." She banged her gavel. "Court is in recess until 2 p.m. As people filed out, Marcus noticed a police officer in uniform watching from the back row. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. She made eye contact and gave a small nod before leaving. Janet gathered her papers with satisfaction. "That went even better than expected. But we're not done yet. I have a feeling this case is about to get much bigger." The courtroom doors swung open at exactly 2 p.m. Everyone turned to see who was entering. An elderly Asian woman walked slowly through the doorway, holding the arm of a younger man in naval uniform. It was Mrs. Dorothy Chen, the missing witness everyone had been searching for. Janet Rodriguez jumped up. "Your Honor, the defense has located our key witness, Mrs. Dorothy Chen." Judge Williams looked surprised but pleased. "This is highly unusual, Counselor, but given the circumstances, I'll allow it. Mrs. Chen, please come forward." Mrs. Chen walked to the witness stand with dignity. Her helper was Lieutenant Commander James Park, Marcus's friend and fellow Navy SEAL. Park had spent weeks tracking down Mrs. Chen after she moved to stay with her daughter in another state. As Mrs. Chen settled into the witness chair, Marcus felt emotional. This woman had tried to defend him that day, and now she was here to tell the truth. He gave her a grateful smile, which she returned warmly. After being sworn in, Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Judge Williams. "I've been waiting 3 months to tell what really happened," she said clearly. "Please tell us what you saw," Janet encouraged. Mrs. Chen began her story. "I was struggling with my groceries. The bags were heavy, and one broke, spilling oranges everywhere. I felt embarrassed and frustrated. Then this young man," she pointed at Marcus, "stopped and came to help." The jury listened intently as she continued. "He was so polite and kind. He picked up all the oranges and loaded my bags carefully. We talked about our families. He told me his mother lived in California, like my grandchildren." "What happened when Officer Stevens arrived?" Janet asked. Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. "That officer came racing in like a madman. Before he even got out, he was yelling. He pushed Mr. Thompson against my car so hard it left a dent." "Did you try to explain the situation?" "I tried many times." Mrs. Chen's voice rose with indignation. "I told him over and over this man was helping me, but he wouldn't listen. He treated me like I was invisible." Stevens shifted uncomfortably at the prosecution table. The jury focused completely on Mrs. Chen's testimony. "I even tried to show him the $20 I'd offered Mr. Thompson, which he refused. But the officer kept telling me to step back. He was so aggressive, so angry. I've never been so frightened." Judge Williams leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, why weren't you available to testify earlier?" Mrs. Chen sighed. "After that terrible day, I was so upset. My daughter worried about my health. She insisted I come stay with her in North Carolina. I didn't know about the trial until Lieutenant Commander Park found me last week." Janet addressed the court. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Park can testify about finding Mrs. Chen and verify her identity." "Proceed," the judge agreed. Lieutenant Commander Park took the stand next, an imposing figure in dress whites with numerous medals. He had known Marcus for 10 years, serving together on multiple deployments. "I've known Commander Thompson since 2015, Park testified. "We've served together in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. He's one of the most honorable men I know. When I heard about these charges, I knew something was wrong." "How did you find Mrs. Chen?" Janet asked. "I used my military intelligence training, tracked her through DMV records, forwarding addresses, and finally located her through her daughter's employer in North Carolina. It took 6 weeks, but I knew she was crucial to Marcus's defense." Park spoke about Marcus's character. "In combat, Marcus always put his team first. He's received commendations for protecting civilians in war zones. The idea he would rob an elderly woman is absurd to anyone who knows him." The prosecutor tried objecting, saying character testimony wasn't relevant, but Judge Williams overruled. Given questions about Officer Stevens' testimony, Commander Thompson's character is very relevant. As Park continued, he revealed something that made the courtroom gasp. "In my research, I discovered this isn't the first time Officer Stevens has been accused of false testimony. I found 3 other cases with similar patterns." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Counselor Rodriguez, were you aware of this?" Janet stood. "Your Honor, we've just received this information. We believe there's a pattern of misconduct needing investigation." At that moment, the police officer from the back row stood. It was Officer Maria Gonzalez. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench?" Judge Williams looked surprised but nodded. Officer Gonzalez walked forward with determination. "Your Honor, I'm Officer Maria Gonzalez, Atlanta PD. I've been keeping records of Officer Stevens' misconduct for 2 years. I have documentation of 3 other cases where he filed false reports against black men. Each was quietly dismissed or settled." The courtroom erupted. People gasped and whispered. Stevens looked panicked, eyes darting toward the exit. Prosecutor Marshall looked stunned. Judge Williams banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order. Order in the court." When the room quieted, she continued, "Officer Gonzalez, this is extremely serious. Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Gonzalez looked ashamed. "I tried, Your Honor. Filed complaints with Internal Affairs, but nothing happened. I was told to mind my own business or risk my career. But seeing what's happening to Commander Thompson, I couldn't stay silent. Marcus felt mixed anger and vindication. He wasn't Stephen's first victim. How many innocent people had suffered? Judge Williams was visibly angry. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Officer Gonzalez, remain available. ADA Marshall, I strongly suggest you contact your superiors immediately. As Peekle stood, Stephen suddenly bolted from his seat, trying to leave. Two bailiffs quickly blocked his path. Officer Stevens, you will remain here, Judge Williams commanded. Bailiffs, ensure he doesn't leave. During recess, Janet huddled with Marcus and Park. This is bigger than we thought. Stevens has been doing this for years, and the department might have been covering up. When court resumed, the atmosphere had completely changed. What started as a simple trial had exposed corruption patterns and cover-ups. The jury looked shocked and angry. Reporters frantically texted their newsrooms. ADA Marshall, what is the state's position? Judge Williams asked. Marshall stood slowly, looking defeated. Your Honor, in light of new evidence and witness testimony, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Thompson. Motion granted. All charges against Commander Thompson are dismissed with prejudice. But she wasn't finished. However, we're not done. Officer Stevens, please approach. Stevens walked forward on shaky legs. His career was over, but worse was coming. Officer Stevens, based on today's evidence, there's substantial proof you committed perjury. You'll remain in custody while we investigate. Bailiff, take Officer Stevens into custody. As Stevens was handcuffed with his own cuffs, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who falsely arrested Marcus was now under arrest himself. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, I'm ordering immediate investigation into the Atlanta Police Department's handling of complaints against Officer Stevens. Officer Gonzalez, I commend your courage in coming forward. She turned to Marcus. Commander Thompson, this court owes you an apology. You've been subjected to grave injustice, falsely arrested, charged, and forced to endure trial based on fabricated evidence. Marcus stood at attention. Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. That's exactly what we're going to do. This case has exposed serious problems needing immediate attention. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Judge Williams called everyone back to order. During the recess, Prosecutor Marshall had been frantically phoning his superiors, while Officer Stevens consulted with his newly arrived lawyer. The atmosphere had shifted from a simple criminal trial to something much larger. Officer Maria Gonzalez stood near the witness stand, holding a thick folder. She had waited 2 years for this moment, collecting evidence and documenting Stevens' misconduct patterns. Finally, someone was listening. Judge Williams addressed the courtroom. Before we proceed with dismissing charges against Commander Thompson, I want to hear more about these additional allegations against Officer Stevens. Stevens' lawyer, David Chin, stood quickly. Your Honor, these are separate matters that should be handled elsewhere. Mr. Chen, your client committed perjury in my courtroom. Judge Williams replied sharply. I have every right to understand the full scope of his misconduct. Officer Gonzalez, please take the stand. As Gonzalez was sworn in, she opened her folder and began pulling out documents. Her hands were steady, but emotion showed in her voice as she began speaking. For 2 years, I've documented multiple incidents involving Officer Stevens. Each follows the same pattern. Black men falsely accused, arrested without proper cause, charged based on fabricated evidence. She held up the first document. Case 1. Deshaun Williams, age 24, arrested for alleged drug possession. Stevens claimed he saw Williams making the drug deal. Security footage showed Williams was simply buying a soda. Charges quietly dropped. The courtroom listened in stunned silence. Case 2. Robert Johnson, age 35, arrested for supposedly threatening a store owner. The owner later said he never felt threatened and Stevens misrepresented the situation. Settled out of court. Case 3. James Mitchell, age 28, accused of vandalism. Stevens claimed he caught Mitchell spray painting. Mitchell was at work, with time records proving it. Again, charges dropped quietly. Judge Williams looked increasingly angry. Officer Gonzalez, did you report these incidents through proper channels? Yes, Your Honor. I filed formal complaints after each incident, all marked investigated and unfounded by internal affairs. I was told to stop causing trouble or face discipline. Marcus watched from the defense table, jaw tight with anger. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Deshaun Williams, Robert Johnson, James Mitchell, and who knew how many others. Stevens sat slumped, his career unraveling before everyone's eyes. His lawyer whispered urgently, probably advising silence. Officer Gonzalez, Janet asked, why do you think these cases were covered up? Gonzalez hesitated. I believe Officer Stevens had protection from someone higher up. These cases were swept under the rug too quickly, too quietly. Someone wanted them to disappear. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Mr. Marshall, I want the district attorney's office to launch full investigation immediately. Not just into Stevens, but into handling of these complaints. Marshall nodded, looking overwhelmed. Yes, Your Honor. I'll contact the DA right away. The courtroom doors opened again. Captain Raymond Foster, Stevens' supervisor, walked in grimly, followed by 2 district attorney representatives. Your Honor, Captain Foster said, I've just been briefed. The Atlanta Police Department is launching full internal investigation. Officer Stevens is suspended immediately. Judge Williams wasn't satisfied. Captain Foster, were you aware of previous complaints against Officer Stevens? Foster shifted uncomfortably. I heard rumors, Your Honor, but internal affairs investigations found no wrongdoing. Convenient, the judge muttered. She turned back to court. This appears to be systemic failure beyond one officer. One DA representative, Patricia Clark, stepped forward. Your Honor, the district attorney's office is prepared to file charges against Officer Stevens for perjury, filing false reports, civil rights violations, and abuse of power. Stevens finally broke his silence. This is all a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job. His lawyer quickly silenced him, but damage was done. His outburst only made him look guiltier. Judge Williams had heard enough. Officer Stevens, you're hereby remanded into custody pending formal charges. Bailiff, remove him from the courtroom. As Stevens was led away in handcuffs, he shot an angry look at Marcus. But Marcus felt no satisfaction. He was thinking about all the victims who suffered in silence. Mrs. Chen, still in the gallery, spoke up. Your Honor, may I say something? The judge nodded. Go ahead, Mrs. Chen. The elderly woman stood slowly. That morning, when Officer Stevens arrested Mr. Thompson, I felt helpless. My words meant nothing to him. How many others felt the same? How many tried to speak truth but weren't heard? Her words hung powerfully in the air. Several jury members wiped their eyes. Judge Williams addressed the courtroom. What we've uncovered today is deeply troubling. A police officer sworn to protect and serve instead abused power to target innocent citizens. Worse, there appears to have been systematic effort to cover up misconduct. She turned to Marcus. Commander Thompson, you have my deepest apologies on behalf of the justice system. Your military service shows you understand honor and integrity. Today, you've helped expose serious breach of both. Marcus stood. Thank you, Your Honor. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about ensuring justice for everyone Officer Stevens targeted. The judge nodded approvingly. Well said, Commander. She announced, this court orders immediate review of all cases where Officer Stevens was primary, extinguishing. This response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Patricia Clark from the DA's office spoke up. Your Honor, we've already begun identifying those cases. We've found at least 12 over the past 5 years that merit immediate review. 12 cases, 12 people whose lives have been affected by Stephen's lies. The number was staggering. Officer Gonzalez was finally allowed to step down. As she passed Marcus, she paused. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come forward," she said quietly. "You came forward when it mattered," Marcus replied. "That took courage." Judge Williams wasn't finished. "I'm also ordering review of internal affairs process at Atlanta Police Department. The fact multiple complaints were dismissed without proper investigation is unacceptable." Captain Foster looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "We'll cooperate fully with any investigation, Your Honor." As formal proceedings wound down, Janet Rodriguez stood for final statement. "Your Honor, my client wishes to establish legal defense fund for victims of Officer Stephen's misconduct. He wants to ensure they have proper representation as cases are reviewed." Marcus nodded. He had already decided to use his own money starting the fund. It was least he could do for others who suffered like him. Judge Williams smiled for first time all day. "That's noble gesture, Commander Thompson. This court is officially adjourned, but I have a feeling this is just beginning of larger conversation about police accountability and justice reform." As people began leaving, reporters rushed forward for statements. What started as simple case had exposed deep corruption in the system. The news of Officer Stephen's arrest and corruption scandal spread through Atlanta like wildfire. Every major outlet covered the story. Evening news headlines read, "Decorated Navy SEAL exposes police corruption." Marcus Thompson's face appeared on every television screen citywide. Back inside the courthouse, Judge Williams had called special evening session. District Attorney Robert Harrison arrived along with Police Commissioner Angela Davis. The conference room packed with officials, lawyers, and investigators. Marcus sat at the large table, still in Navy dress uniform. Janet Rodriguez beside him, along with Officer Maria Gonzalez, now key witness in expanding investigation. Mrs. Chen stayed too, determined to see justice done. DA Harrison spoke first. "Commander Thompson, what happened to you is inexcusable. We've begun reviewing Officer Stephen's cases. What we're finding is deeply disturbing." He opened thick folder. "In past 5 years, Stephen's made over 200 arrests. We're examining each one, but initial reviews show at least 30 cases with serious problems." Commissioner Davis looked troubled. "We've discovered complaints against Stephen's were systematically buried. 3 supervisors placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Marcus leaned forward. "What about the men he falsely arrested? Deshaun Williams, Robert Johnson, James Mitchell. What happened to them?" The DA pulled another file. "Deshaun Williams spent 6 months in jail before charges dropped, lost his job and apartment. Robert Johnson paid $10,000 settlement avoiding trial. James Mitchell was lucky. Employer provided alibi, but still spent 3 days in jail." The room fell silent. These weren't just names on paper. These were real people whose lives had been damaged. Officer Gonzalez spoke up. "There are more. Stephen's often targeted young black men in certain neighborhoods. He knew they were less likely to have good lawyers or security footage." Judge Williams, who joined the meeting, shook her head in disgust. "This is systematic racial profiling and abuse. How did this continue so long?" An internal affairs captain admitted sheepishly, "Stephen's had friends in high places. Complaints would mysteriously disappear or be marked unfounded without investigation." Commissioner Davis turned to him. "Who exactly were these friends, Captain Morrison?" Morrison hesitated, then named 3 high-ranking officers. Commissioner's face darkened. "They'll all be investigated. This ends now." Marcus felt mixed satisfaction and anger. Justice finally being served, but it took too long. Too many suffered. "What about compensation for victims?" Janet asked. "These men lost jobs, homes, freedom based on false charges." DA Harrison nodded. City will offer settlements to all Stevens false arrest victims. We're expediting process to clear records. A young assistant rushed in with laptop. Sir, you need to see this about Officer Stevens. The assistant connected laptop to projector. Stevens' personnel file appeared with new information. We found pattern going back 8 years. Stevens specifically requested assignments in predominantly black neighborhoods. His arrest rates were 3 times higher than other officers. Commissioner Davis stood angrily. 8 years. This man terrorized communities for 8 years, and we did nothing. Mayor Charles Washington entered, looking gravely concerned after being briefed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is crisis for our city. We need immediate action. He turned to Marcus. Commander Thompson, I personally apologize. You served our country with honor, only to be falsely accused in your own city. That's unacceptable. Marcus appreciated the apology but wanted action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What matters now is helping other victims and ensuring this never happens again. Mayor nodded. Agreed. I'm announcing complete overhaul of police oversight. We're creating independent civilian review board with real power investigating complaints. Over next 2 hours, group developed comprehensive plan. All Stevens arrests would be reviewed. Victims contacted and offered legal assistance. Internal affairs restructured. New training on bias and accountability mandatory for all officers. Marcus received text from Lieutenant Commander Park. Check the news, it read. Someone turned on conference room television. National news now covered the story. Decorated Navy SEAL exposes years of police corruption in Atlanta, anchor announced. News showed footage from trial, including moments security video exposed Stevens' lies. Legal experts interviewed called it one of most egregious cases of police perjury in recent memory. Then something unexpected happened. News showed people gathering outside courthouse. Growing crowd came to show support. Many held signs reading "Justice for All" and "Truth Wins." Commissioner Davis received phone call. After listening, she announced 3 more officers came forward with information about Stevens and cover-up. They want to cooperate. The dam was breaking. Years of silence and fear giving way to truth and accountability. Judge Williams spoke. I've been judge 20 years, never seen anything like this. One man's courage fighting false charges exposed systemic corruption. Commander Thompson, you've done great service to this city. Marcus remained humble. I had advantages others didn't. Good lawyer, video evidence, witnesses willing to testify. Many victims don't have those resources, which is why your legal defense fund's so important, Mayor added. City will contribute $1 million to fund. Room erupted in surprise murmurs. This was significant commitment. As meeting wound down, concrete actions in place. By tomorrow, letters would go to all Stevens arrestees, offering legal help and potential compensation. 3 suspended supervisors face full investigations. New oversight policies drafted within week. Marcus stood to leave, exhausted but hopeful. Passing holding cells, he saw Stevens through small window, sitting with head in hands. The man who abused power for years finally facing justice. Outside, crowd groaned even larger. When Marcus emerged, they erupted in cheers and applause. He wasn't comfortable with attention, but understood what he represented. Hope system could be fixed. Truth could prevail. Mrs. Chen beside him, beaming with pride. You didn't just save yourself. You saved so many others. Officer Gonzalez joined them on courthouse steps. For first time in years, she looked relieved. I can finally sleep knowing I did right thing. Sun setting over Atlanta, painting sky orange and purple. Tomorrow, real work would begin. Reviewing cases, compensating victims, reforming system. But tonight, Marcus felt at peace. He completed many missions as Navy SEAL, but this might have been most important. He fought not with weapons but truth, not against foreign enemies but corruption at home. And he won not just for himself, but for everyone silenced, ignored, or falsely accused. Battle won, but war for justice would continue. Marcus was ready for that fight. The aftermath of the trial rippled through Atlanta like an earthquake. 3 days after Officer Stevens' arrest, the full scope of corruption became clear. Federal investigators joined the case, and their findings shocked even cynical observers. Marcus Thompson sat in his hotel room watching morning news. Every channel covered the story. CNN showed split screen, his Navy portrait beside Stevens' mugshot. Headline read, "Hero versus Villain. How one SEAL exposed years of police corruption." His phone rang constantly. Interview requests poured in from major networks, publishers, documentary filmmakers. But Marcus wasn't interested in fame. He had a different mission now. At the federal building downtown, FBI Special Agent Sarah Mitchell led expanded investigation. She uncovered something making Atlanta scandal even bigger. Stevens wasn't working alone. He was part of corrupt officer network across 3 states. "Commander Thompson," Agent Mitchell said as Marcus arrived for meeting, "what you expose goes beyond Atlanta. We found similar patterns in departments throughout Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina." Marcus felt weight of this revelation. How many innocent people victimized by this network? Numbers were staggering. That afternoon, press conference held at City Hall. Mayor Washington, Commissioner Davis, and DA Harrison faced packed reporter room. Marcus stood aside, uncomfortable with attention but understanding its necessity. "We're announcing formation of Thompson Commission," Mayor declared. "Named after Commander Marcus Thompson, this independent body will review all questionable arrests and convictions over past decade." Room erupted with questions. One reporter asked, "How many cases are we talking about?" DA Harrison responded grimly, "Initial estimates suggest over 500 cases need review. We've already identified 47 wrongful convictions for immediate overturn." Marcus stepped forward when asked to speak. "This isn't about me. It's about Deshaun Williams, who missed daughter's first birthday while wrongfully imprisoned. About Robert Johnson, who lost business fighting false charges. About every person denied justice." Impact was immediate. That evening, Deshaun Williams appeared on local news, tears in eyes. "I told them I was innocent, but nobody listened." Robert Johnson's story equally moving. "Small business owner spent life savings on legal fees. Officer Stevens destroyed my reputation. Customers stopped coming. I almost lost everything my family built over generations." James Mitchell came forward with his story. "I was lucky, boss believed me. But those 3 jail days were worst of my life. Kept thinking, if this happens to me, it can happen to anyone." As stories aired, public anger grew. Protests formed outside police precincts. Citizens demanded accountability and reform. #JusticeForAll began trending nationally. Marcus established legal defense fund as promised, contributing $100,000 personally. Within 48 hours, donations poured in nationwide. Corporate sponsors, celebrities, ordinary citizens contributed. Fund quickly exceeded $5 million. Lieutenant Commander Park helped manage fund operations. "We've already provided lawyers for 23 victims," he reported. "More calling daily." Meanwhile, Stevens sat in federal custody, his lie empire crumbling. 3 other officers arrested as co-conspirators. They helped Stevens falsify reports and intimidate witnesses. Network finally being dismantled. Story took dramatic turn when Sergeant Maria Rodriguez came forward with explosive evidence. She secretly recorded conversations with Stevens and accomplices over 2 years. One recording had Stevens saying, "These people don't have good lawyers. They'll take plea deals rather than fight. Easy stats for us. Department looks good." Another recording revealed complaint suppression. Supervisor heard saying, "Bury the Gonzalez complaint. She doesn't know what's good for her career." These recordings made national news. FBI expanded investigation, including obstruction and conspiracy charges. Scandal reached department's highest levels. Marcus received Pentagon call. Admiral James Robertson, former commander, wanted to discuss something important. They met at quiet downtown restaurant. "Marcus," Admiral said, "what you've done is remarkable. You showed same courage in civilian life as combat. Navy wants to honor that." He slid folder across table. Inside was commendation for exceptional civilian service, rare honor for actions outside military duty. But Marcus more interested in Admiral's other news. Department of Defense reviewing all military personnel possibly affected by similar misconduct. Your case opened eyes at highest levels. That evening, Marcus visited Mrs. Chen at daughter's house. Elderly woman had become celebrity herself, known for fierce testimony and unwavering truth support. "You know," she said, serving tea, "my grandfather fought for justice in China years ago. Always told me one person standing for truth can change everything. You proved him right." They watched news together as developments unfolded. 3 supervisors who covered for Stevens formally charged. Internal affairs completely restructured. New policies required all complaints investigated by independent board. Perhaps most significant moment came when first wrongfully convicted person released. Thomas Washington, 28-year-old father of 2, walked from prison after serving 3 years for crime he didn't commit. Stevens fabricated evidence in drug case. Media captured emotional moment as Washington hugged children for first time in years. "Never gave up hope," he said through tears. Knew someday truth would surface. Marcus watched reunion from hotel room, feeling mixed joy and anger. Joy, Washington was free. Anger, he lost 3 years. Many more reunions coming in weeks ahead. As week ended, transformation remarkable. What started as one false arrest exposed systematic corruption affecting hundreds. Atlanta police underwent most significant reform in history. Other cities examined procedures, worried about similar problems. Marcus received letter from President commending courage and inviting him to White House, but more touched by handwritten notes from victims and families thanking him for giving hope. Officer Gonzalez promoted to head new Community Relations Division. Her courage finally recognized and rewarded. She would help rebuild trust between police and communities served. Stevens faced multiple life sentences. Federal charges alone could imprison him 50 years. His corrupt network dismantled, with 12 arrests across 3 states. As Marcus prepared returning to active duty, he reflected on past months. He faced enemy combatants in war zones, but fighting home injustice was equally challenging and perhaps more important. Legal Defense Fund, now fully operational with board of directors and full-time staff, would continue helping victims long after Marcus returned to military duties. His mission would live on through others. Standing on hotel balcony overlooking Atlanta skyline, Marcus felt accomplished. City looked same, but something fundamental changed. People saw truth could defeat lies, courage could overcome corruption.